May I come, sir? Yes. Morning, sir.
Kindly sit down, Tanmay.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, Tanmay, you look like a rock star.
Thank you, sir.
You still play?
Yes, sir.
And what bass guitar do you have?
So I have the Fender bass guitar.
Fender bass.
Yes, sir.
And what amp do you use?
Amp?
Yeah,
Marshall amp.
Marshall amp.
Yes.
Okay, are you playing in a band?
I used to, not anymore. I still play with some of my friends, but we don't have an official band anymore.
So do you stay in a flat or an independent house?
I stay at my home with my parents.
But that home is in a flat or in a independent house?
Independent house.
Now, are your neighbors happy with your bass guitar?
They haven't complained yet, sir.
They haven't complained.
Yet.
So obviously you haven't broken the window panes of your neighbors.
Not yet.
You
sir.
play the bass very softly.
Yes, sir. Also, a lot of bass players develop tinnitus if they play too loud. So I try to.
You play it soft. All right. Okay. And how many in the watt amp is it?
It's a 40 watt amp.
40 watt amp.
Yeah, it's a small.
So
amp.
what is the size of the speaker?
It's about this.
Oh,
Like-
that's a baby amp. That's not the bass guitar amp that we can be proud of.
Yes,
Unless you break the windows of your neighbors, then what is the bass guitar for?
Yes, sir. It's for practice.
Okay. All right. Who is your favorite bass guitar player?
My favorite bass guitar player would be Roger Waters from Pink Floyd.
Okay. Have you heard of Hank Marvin, the lead guitarist?
I haven't, sir.
Have you heard of The Shadows?
No, sir.
Have you heard of Cliff Richard? Elvis Presley?
Elvis Presley.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'm interested in your professional
Yes.
DEF, I think it's a very fascinating field. You have worked in computational linguistics and you have worked on machine translation.
Yes, sir.
Now, machine translation interests me very greatly, personally. I want to ask you two questions. It has improved greatly in recent years, the machine translation, if you are using the Google translation, or you are using Siri, or you are using Mac Dictate, or you are using before that Dragon Speak, or whatever it is. I've followed it since Tambe Saab put the Lisp card in CDAC in Pune,
Yes, sir.
and I've tried to follow it. Now, why I've tried to follow it is I'm a humanities person. I don't understand the integrities, but I do translation, and I do bilingual translation. And I do translation of all kinds. There are routine letters, etc. But more interesting is translating fiction and translating, from English to Hindi or Hindi to English. So I wanted to ask you this question, that as a person specializing and who's performed brilliantly in machine translation,
Yes,
do you think that there are certain disadvantages in using machine translation for a language which is not as widely used as, let's say, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic? This was the same problem with Hindi fonts and Hindi,
Yes.
whether you are doing pages, it used to be miles superior to what other word processing programs were.
Yes, sir.
But it was so in English, not necessarily in Hindi. So in Hindi, it came much later, but became better. But same thing happened in dictations. When you dictated something, it was, so to speak, voice-to-text translation.
Yes, sir.
So if you have, forget about voice-to-text translation, but a machine translation of a short paragraph, which is fiction, do you think it makes a difference if you are translating from French to English or English to French, rather than English to Hindi or Hindi to English?
Definitely, sir. With the recent growth in machine translation and recent growth in performance, as you said, all of these systems are largely data-driven. And we call them high resource, middle resource, and low resource languages. Hindi earlier was a low resource language and it didn't perform as well as other languages. Now Hindi is known as a high resource language. So Google Translate or text to speech for Hindi will perform much better than, let's say, systems for Telugu or for Malayalam or for languages like Konkani and Mundari. They perform much worse because most of these systems rely on millions and millions of lines of data, which is not available for most of these languages. But for these languages, what we do is we focus on rule-based systems, where we manually find out the linguistic rules of these languages and we work on that. But it's the truth that it doesn't work as well as data-driven.
The second question is more complicated. The rule-based system works when you are doing the syntactical work of everyday work.
Yeah.
But where you are talking in terms of, let's say, forget about fiction, let's take the extreme case of poetry, where
Yes,
you
sir.
take a poetic license.
Yes, sir.
And the tone and a voice of a poet matters as much as the word, the text.
Yes, sir.
Then what are the challenges? How does the machine translation cope with this challenge?
Definitely, sir. Even data-driven systems haven't done very well in translating fiction. At best, what these systems try to do is to take the translation to an 80% or 85% level, and it's recommended that a human works on it after. So at best, what these systems try to do is reduce the, let's say, grunt level work of translation. However, even till date, machine translation systems, even data-driven ones, don't do that well in fiction because they're trained on lots and lots of data and they learn very generic rules. They don't pick up idioms as well. They'll translate them literally. They don't understand subtext in fiction. They don't understand what's the
I
largest...
quite concede the point, and I think you are answering that very well.
Yes, sir.
Let's take it to the other level. We take it to the level of poetry and poetic license,
Yes.
and the tone of a poet's voice and the emotional charge. Let's say you are translating Eliot is one thing. You are translating Ezra Pound, it is different.
Yes.
Because Ezra Pound, without knowing Chinese, is working into his Pisan cantos or other cantos generally,
Yes,
a
sir.
bit of Chinese, a bit of Japanese, a bit of Usuri, a bit of fold-ins of poetic references from Greeks to present day.
Yes, sir.
That presupposes so much more.
Yes, sir. And particularly in poetry, the connotation of words, the cultural elements in poetry, the, like you're saying, the subtext of what the poet is trying to say, the emotional connotations of each words, it's hard for machines to find the correct translation into the
No,
target.
I'm not interested in correct translation because there is a long essay by Vladimir Nabokov on translation of a long poem by Pushkin Ivan Ungin, where he says what is better, a literal translation or a creative transcreation. Nabokov votes in favor of literal translation in this particular poem.
Yes, sir.
My problem is that what you answered, your second answer was very interesting, that 80% of the dirty work is done and a human works on the rest.
Yes.
But is it possible at all in poetry? Even the 80% can't be there. And if you are giving me 10% garbled, so I'm starting from worse than where I was.
Yes, plus the 80% may presuppose certain things that you may have to rework again. So for poetry, I will agree with my current knowledge about machine translation. It's not recommended that you use machine translation systems for poetry. For poetry, for literature, it's largely recommended that we stick to human translations as of today.
I'll stay with that. Thank you very much. I'll pass you on to Ambassador Swaroop.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Tanmay, have you heard the term soft power
Yes, sir.
as coined by Joseph Nye?
Yes, sir.
What does it mean?
The soft power is any medium of power which is not economic or military. So our cultural power, the power of diplomacy between two different nations, the power of human connections, social connections between two different countries. Basically, any way we can use to influence other countries without our economic or military strength is something that would be called soft power.
So, as a Ukrainian, what would you think of Russian soft power?
So Russian soft power,
As a Ukrainian.
yeah, as a Ukrainian, I would think that because of Russian soft power, they've been able to shift the dialogue against Ukrainians in a lot of countries which are not Western Europe or the US, whereby they've tried to spread this idea that if you support Ukraine, you support Nazis in Ukraine, or that Russia is merely protecting its own borders. And the truth of that is debatable, but this sort of propaganda that's being spread in Russia would be a part of their soft power.
Russia now claims that the war that is being fought in Ukraine is actually a proxy war that NATO is fighting Russia, using Ukraine as the
Yes,
sort of, the decoy. Do you agree with Russia's assessment?
So I do agree that NATO and the US are pumping a lot of money and weapons into this area. It doesn't seem like they're immediately interested in lowering the conflict or coming to a discussion. Rather, it probably benefits the US if there is a bipolar world, one where not only their military strength is being used, but also they're seen as a superpower that's supporting Ukraine. So yes, I do think that they are using Ukraine in a way to fight a proxy war with Russia.
But how long can this continue? I mean, eventually will some war fatigue set in or no?
It had set in a few months ago, but it seems like it's rising again with more and more money and more weapons being pumped in. India is certainly trying as part of G20 and as part of other ways to bring the two countries to a dialogue. Russian foreign minister has said that at certain points Russia is ready to come to a dialogue, but I'm not sure exactly.
Some Western countries have accused India of profiteering from the war by buying discounted Russian oil, which is adding to the coffers of President Putin, which is directly going into the war effort. Do you agree with that assessment?
So I wouldn't call it profiteering by India, because India hasn't done anything extra to try and lower the price of Russian oil. It's United States sanctions and Western sanctions that themselves have reduced the price of Russian oil. And because we are a developing country, there's no way we can say no to cheaper oil to develop our industries because of a larger moral standard.
Last question. If you were asked to design a peace plan which will be acceptable broadly, I mean, no peace plan will be compared to Ukraine and to Russia, what will be the elements you will put in it which will be palatable to Russia and palatable to Ukraine, and which has some chance of succeeding?
So I would say that on Russia's side, they would need certain assurances to reduce NATO expansion, particularly in Eastern Europe. So Ukraine being a part of NATO might be something that we have to block for a little bit. Ukraine, on the other hand, would need security assurances on its borders. So maybe there can be certain areas can have a ceasefire, and we can see how to draw the borders in a way that Ukraine feels secure and Russia doesn't feel like NATO is expanding.
No, but that's a very woolly answer. What about the territory Russia has already conquered so far, starting from Crimea 2014?
It's more tricky because they have done a referendum there, and while I don't know the veracity of such a referendum, it does seem like the majority of people say that they want to be with Russia. In that case, maybe to avoid further loss of life, we can push Ukraine to consider to redraw the borders. But I'm not sure if...
No, will that be acceptable to Ukraine?
Not completely. There would have to be some balance there. Maybe Russia would give certain assurances of recognizing exact borders. Maybe some of the areas can be given and taken.
Last question. What is the motto of India's G20 presidency? The theme?
So the motto is Vasudev Kutumbakam, and in English they call it one world, one family, and one future.
Thank you.
One planet. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tanmai Khanna.
Yes, sir.
With your guitar in your hand, your friends must be thinking that you are the young Paul McCartney. The glasses are also so close to Sir Paul McCartney. You have written here that you have been also an adjudicator in some Pilani parliamentary debates.
Yes, sir.
Do we have an adjudicator in a parliamentary debate?
Yes, sir. Adjudicator there is just a word for...
I understand.
Yeah.
What is it for? So in parliamentary debates...
In the actual parliament, we don't have an adjudicator per se, because here we want to say this side won the competition and this side didn't. In the actual parliament, we have the speaker that regulates the debate, but there's no adjudicator.
Exactly. So when you are sitting as an adjudicator in a parliamentary debate or any debate, how do you take care of your own biases coming into deciding that the which party or the which group or which debater won the debate?
Yes, sir. So apart from writing all the arguments down and trying to see internal consistency in how they're debating, one of the things that makes me set aside my bias is that right after a debate in this competition, adjudicators have to justify their decision to the two parties. And if it seems like in my justification I haven't been clear in why I gave the win to one side over the other, it will seem like a bias and they will mark me down as an adjudicator. So I know that I have to convince both the winning and the losing side that my decision was fair, which makes me use objective measures rather than my own.
Still, all in a parliamentary spirit. Has ever your adjudication been questioned by the participants?
Sometimes, yes, sir. It's hard to convince the losing side that their arguments didn't match up to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, people who participate in these debates take it in a sporting.
That's good. You are an engineering graduate and sociology is your optional.
Yes, sir.
So as you know that there are the various dynamics and the various factors that leads to gradual social changes. So let's take at least one agent. For example, say the judiciary or the statutory process as an agent of social change.
Yes, sir.
Then can you mention some change in social society where these two agents have worked?
The judiciary
and the statutory processes.
Okay.
Statutes.
The judiciary has brought social change. For example, when they brought out the Vishakha guidelines, where they tried to make people more aware about sexual harassment in the workplace and try to build better workplaces. As for statutory laws, raising the age of marriage is one where we try to bring social change. The POCSO law or any law to prevent child marriages is another where we try to push it in that direction. Abolition of untouchability, trying to bring reservations. These are all ways to improve social relations between different groups in society.
You mentioned Vishakha guidelines, which later again then a statute was made, yes, mostly based on that. You also mentioned, for example, the Child Marriage Act. Yes. Statutory processes are working more in conflict than in compliance, and these both problems are very pronounced, and we keep hearing about them. So do you think the laws are failing, or do you think that implementation of the laws is faulty, or do you think that we do not respect the laws enough?
Implementation at the ground is definitely hard to monitor, and there is a lot more to improve there. However, social changes are very slow and very gradual. We are a young country at 75, and we have improved in most metrics of child mortality and infant mortality. Age of marriage is increasing, education of the girls are increasing. So I do think that in a gradual manner, these laws will lead to good social change, but it will be gradual.
Your DAF reads that you are from Gautam Buddha Nagar, you are living there. Recently, that Uttar Pradesh, the various parts of UP, they are trying to attract investments.
Yes, sir.
And then a lot of investment, actually the major part of the investment is being drawn by the Gautam Buddha Nagar. Yes. So, but then we would want to have a balanced development. Yes. So what is so special about Gautam Buddha Nagar?
So Gautam Buddha Nagar, its vicinity to Delhi offers a lot of opportunities there. In Gautam Buddha Nagar, we have much better infrastructure than I think South UP. We have a lot of industries, we have special economic zones. So there's a lot to attract businesses there. However, in the recent Global Investors Summit, we have a green corridor being created in Bundelkhand. We have expressways being created, airports being created all over UP. So without regulating businesses too much, we let them go where it would bring the most profit to them, while still we nudge them towards investing in all four parts of UP. And it's definitely improved much more than...
And at last, if I could ask a light-hearted, a bit mundane question, the accent that you picked up, is it due to singing too much of the rocks, Western rock?
Accent, I'm not sure. In fact, I was surprised when someone told me that I have a different accent.
I don't think that's the
I
problem
was,
at all. I don't think you don't have an accent.
Yes, I was surprised as well. But if I have to analyze it, maybe the school I grew up, maybe parliamentary debating with certain sections made this accent, but nothing to do with music.
Anyway, it's nothing. I told you that it's a light-hearted band. Just like
I
We
think
all like
Bollywood-
rock music.
Yes.
Bollywood music also, I sing. So.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Very good. Who was Paul McCartney he mentioned?
He was a singer and a guitarist in the Beatles.
What did he play?
He played the bass guitar.
He played the bass, right.
And do you think his glass design matched your glass design?
No, but he doesn't wear the glasses.
Yes.
He doesn't wear the glasses.
I haven't seen him.
No, he doesn't wear the
No,
glasses.
I have seen some of his pictures wearing glasses. Maybe for
Okay,
just for effect, he might have.
That is what surprised me.
Guitar glasses are
Lennon's.
John Lennon
John
wears-
Lennon's.
is known for wearing
And
glasses.
that vintage
Hank
was
Marvin is
yes, and that vintage Beatles vintage was round
Yeah,
glasses.
the
not-
round, small,
not
round
these
glasses.
ones.
yeah, not
Yes,
these.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but I have found nothing wrong with your accent. It was
No, it's
basically you
absolutely
come
all right.
from a good school, and so that was fine.
Yes.
So, sir, पहले आपको
I'm very happy with you.
Accent is
Yeah,
fine. Nothing
outstanding.
wrong with that.
outstanding.
Thank you, sir.
You're very good. You're very good indeed.
First attempt.
Yeah.
I was very impressed. I think you handle yourself very well for a person coming from, forget about our shared interest in machine translation.
Yes.
For a person coming from an engineering background, you handle Ambassador Swaroop's questions very well, including the most difficult one, where you had to be woolly because nobody has an answer to how the conflict will end. And you handled Professor Tripathi's question.
And you made it in the first attempt to here. It's very, very creditable.
No, I expect
Thank
you
you.
to top 10 if you have done your.
I
Which
would,
wins?
I would also bet very heavily on your being in the first top 10 if you have not botched up your
written.
So, just tell me, Bluebell School, where is this school?
Kailash.
Kailash College.
Kailash Wala.
Right opposite LSR.
They had
Yeah.
an exchange program with Russia
All
at
right.
one stage.
Now,
Yes.
do you have a dark blue suit also?
In school?
Dark.
Dark blue suit.
Do you have a dark suit also?
Oh, I don't own one. No.
You don't know.
In that
When
case,
is your interview?
11th April.
11th April.
it is worth your while to invest in at least a charcoal grey
Charcoal,
suit.
Okay.
I think this is for the
Although
weather.
this
Right.
is smart, for
For
the
the
weather
weather
it
it
is
is
smart.
right.
Do you think we should?
Yeah, I don't think these things really matter.
It's okay.
And you know,
This one is okay.
ये वो तो elitism की
Yeah.
फिर वो
But
और
white
उसके बाद
shirt,
heat होगी,
shirt,
26
white
shirt he is wearing white.
Is
Maybe
it white or is
shirt
it
could be
little
white.
pinkish?
It's
It is white.
It's Putin who wears all the time this color, but then you should wear the white shirt. I think.
It is white or no?
This is white.
It's a white. That's not saying it's a white shirt.
It's white.
So somehow मुझे pinkish लग रही थी.
नहीं नहीं, it's a fine.
My
it's a-
cataract. हाँ.
It's-
No, I think for that weather, when you go for interviews, even this color of
Yeah, I
suit,
think
just
I
like
it's
think
okay.
it's
Yes.
fine.
Yeah. You are perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have any question?
No, sir, that's it.
good luck to you.
See you in top 10. All the best.
Thank you, sir. I hope so, sir.
Yeah. Keep smiling.
Thank you, sir.